Hey, good morning, everybody. I hope you have your coffee or tea and you are ready for a fantastic, amazing conversation. My name is Alex Perez with ABC News. I work for a few shows that maybe you've heard of, Good Morning America, World News Tonight with David Muir, 2020, Nightline, and we're part of the Walt Disney Company, and we have some amazing aspects and parts of the Walt Disney Company. And today we're going to get to talk to some of those show creators and content developers and really get inside their brains and talk to them about the importance and relevance of just being seen. So I'm super pumped and excited. It is early morning, but I'm so happy that I don't even remember that it's early morning. It kind of feels like afternoon because I can't wait to hear what all of you guys have to say. Now, I'm going to quickly mention some of our panelists, and they're going to tell us a few words about themselves. We have Sarah Johnson, Stephen Hunter, Dan DeNicola, Stephen Canals, and everyone. I want you to just listen up a little bit and really learn a little bit more about everyone who's on this panel and just all the work that goes in to what they do. So, Sarah, maybe you can start just a few words about yourself.
Sure. Morning, everyone. Thanks, Alex. My name's Sarah Johnson. I'm a feature producer at ESPN. I've been here about 15 years. It was 15 years in June. The first 10 years on the studio directing side, the last 5+ years on the producing side. I'm also one of the founders of ESPN Equal, which is our business employee resource group we started about 11 years ago. So I've been in just about every position from, membership chair, events chair, vice president, president, co-chair, content chair, which is the role I currently sit in. So in that responsibility, I screen basically all LGBTQ content that's going to come across on any of the ESPN platforms, all the way from interview questions to the final viewing of the feature before it goes to air.
Cool. And Sarah, I mentioned to her before we started, has the best ending line in her bio that I've seen in a long time. Her last line says, has ambitions to become both a generous billionaire and a full-time cat lady. Yep. Who doesn't, right? Okay, perfect. Stephen Hunter. Stephen, how about a few words about yourself?
Good morning. My name is Stephen Hunter. I'm an animator over at Pixar Animation Studios. I've been there for 23 years now. I helped a lot of storytellers tell their stories, and then I got a chance to tell mine with Out. So I got to direct that film. And that's it. Yeah. Just awesome. Making cartoons.
Thanks, Stephen. And a lot of you guys are on the West Coast where it's super early. So thank you for joining us and sharing a few words with us. Dan, good morning.
Morning, guys. Dan DeNicola here. I'm on the scripted originals team at Hulu. I've been on that team for about 6 years. I have lived in LA for 11 years. It is really early here. I think this is the earliest I've gotten up since before lockdown, when I was still going to the gym in the mornings. But I'm from New York originally, and I saw in the chat that someone said good morning from Westchester. Grew up in White Plains. Hi, Westchester. It's good to be here with all of you.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks for waking up for us. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Canals, coming to you from New York City, where I am heading back into production. I am the executive producer, co-creator, writer, and director of the Golden Globe nominated and Emmy and Peabody Award winning FX drama series Pose.
Awesome, and so happy you can join us this morning. And you guys, just like Stephen, have been part of so many award-winning, award-nominated productions that I can't wait to hear about it. So let's jump into some of the questions here. Let's start with Stephen H. And that'll make it easier for us to distinguish Stephen H. and Stephen C. So you know who I'm talking to. Stephen H., you directed and wrote the incredible short film Out, which featured the studio's first gay lead character. How does something like that come to be? Because it was a big accomplishment for all of us to see someone who looks like us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two arcs of that story, and one is like the personal for me, and then one is the sort of institutional at Pixar, where a couple of years back they started the Spark Shorts program, which was the intent was to get more diverse group of filmmakers telling their stories. And I got to be a part of the first two. So was Smash and Grab, directed by Brian Larson, and the second one was Pearl, directed by Kristen Lester, about the ball of yarn, working at a capital investment company. And I had a great time working on those. And then as it went along, they said, "Hey, do you have a story you want to tell?" And I've never thought about talking about my queerness. It's just been something that is just separate. I've kept this world separate for so long. I didn't come out until I was 27. So let's go back to the personal. I was very closeted. You know, I was tried so hard to be heterosexual through most of my life, you know, and then, you know, finally I was like, I can't do this anymore. But I mean, part of that too is like, I just wanted to be the best little animator I could be, you know, and just like be the best I could do, help other people tell their stories, but I'm just going to sit in the background kind of thing. So when it came time for them to say, "Hey, you got a story you want to tell?" I sat down and I started writing like things that I wanted to see in movies, and then themes that I wanted to work on. And then I kept bouncing back and forth between these two, and I kept coming up with coming out stories. And I realized it was something that I needed to I needed to work through. And hey, I'm an animator, so why not do it through comedy and animation, right? So that's sort of like how the journey got to that point of creating that.
Was it scary for you at first? You know, we have our personal lives and our professional lives. And I think for a lot of us, it starts with our personal life, where you start to be yourself, and then you figure out how to work that into your professional life, which sounds like that's what you did. Was that turn there a scary one that you probably remember very clearly? Yeah,
but we have a really great community at Pixar, like LGBTQ community. And there was one year, Jamie Roderick, who's one of our works at Pixar. He's also a drag performer in the city, and they put on a show at Pixar in the big amphitheater kind of thing. And I got to see somebody. This is while I'm still working on the story for Out, and I got to see somebody bring his personal life and his work life together on stage, and it was so emotional to watch. And I realized, oh my God, that's what I'm doing, like through this process of creating this story and putting it out into the world. And it was a very emotional journey. It's still emotional. Like, I'm actually kind of emotional right now, even just talking about it. Yeah, it's definitely been eye-opening, soul-opening, and a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that moment with us. I think so many of us aspire to get there. And when we finally get there, you're so excited that you don't take that second to recognize it. So talking about it, hearing you talk about it, just is it's inspiring in many ways to a lot of people. So thank you, Stephen. Dan, you know, in LGBTQ storytelling, it's important that things are authentic and that they resemble, you know, real life. Over at Hulu, the content creation is it's constantly going. It doesn't end because, you know, you're always coming out with new things. So how do you work to maintain that LGBTQ authenticity remains and is there? How does that process happen?
That's a really good question, and it's one that we talk about internally a lot, and that I'm personally very mindful of, but I know the entire team is. You know, as I said, I've been at Hulu for 6 years, and when I got there in 2014, one of the deals that they were already trying to make was for difficult people, with one of our first flagship premium original series created by Julie Klausner, who's an ally, but starring Billy Eichner and people like Cole Escola, who are obviously part of the LGBTQ community. And now, you know, just this past summer, I had the privilege of being a part of the Hulu team on Love, Victor, which was a show that originated at Disney Plus, wound up launching on our platform, and we're working on season 2 right now, and it's been an incredibly exciting journey to work with them. And I'll say that, you know, just from 6 years ago to now, programming for the audience and representing the audience authentically has been a massive priority. And for us, it's really a matter of just being super intentional about it and meeting with queer storytellers across an array of different genres and fields, you know, because the LGBTQ audience, I don't think that we think is a monolith. You know, as a member of that community, I'm not interested in watching only one type of show. I want to see myself reflected across a variety of genres. And so it's about meeting with those storytellers and making sure that our purview is permeable and we're getting access to a lot of different storytellers who bring that point of view and that authenticity to a variety of genres, so that we're serving that audience as meaningfully as possible, and supporting them. And, you know, we have a curated slate. We as you said, like, we're making a lot of shows. We put content out at a good rate, but we're not just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. We bring a lot of intention to everything that we program and to everything that we support with marketing and publicity. And so the question that we're always asking ourselves is, how can we making sure that what we're putting the Hulu brand behind is reflecting that audience responsibly and authentically, as you said. And a lot of that's just keeping shots on goal and filling the pipeline and meeting with those storytellers and bringing them into the fold.
Yeah, when you think about how far we've come, or have you thought about how far we've come? Because I can think back, you know, to the 80s or 90s, you know, before I myself had come out of the closet or dealt with, you know, my emotions. You would only see stereotypical characters, and you can sort of, you would see who those roles, you knew exactly how they were going to play out. But now we do see a variety. We see the full spectrum, and that's intentional, you're saying, right?
Absolutely. You know, there's not one type of gay person, and there shouldn't be one type of show that reaches that audience. We want members of the community to be a part of every audience for every one of our shows, hopefully. And so the question is always, like, how are you bringing that point of view and that authenticity to a wide array of stories?
Yeah, because there's so many of us and so much depth that there's still a lot of ground to cover. Okay, Sarah, let's move on to a question for you. So ESPN has the biggest megaphone in all of sports, and I can tell you, as like a gay kid growing up in the Midwest, I was almost afraid to turn the channel on ESPN because I thought I just wasn't, you know, boy enough to do any of those things or those sports. I was afraid of it, even though I did have interest in sports. So learning that there are people like you there who, you know, your job is to make sure that the company is inclusive, responsible in how they portray LGBTQ communities. So how do you do that?
It's been a decade and change. So it certainly wasn't something that was overnight. But like you, I grew up seeing certain representations, if I saw representation at all. And sports has always had that interesting double standard where it's like, if you're a woman playing pro sports, you must be gay. But if you're like, there's no gay males in sports, no way, you know? And so I didn't see a lot of it, excuse me, growing up. So getting to ESPN and with the formation of our employee resource groups, honestly, the first few years of the group was a lot of company statements. It was a lot of phone calls like, so-and-so just said this on the radio. How much trouble are we in? Or we just printed this and the feedback is terrible. What should we write? And so over the last 11 years, I think this is one of the key things that really helps us to tell these inclusive and respectful stories is rather than a, you know, print first, apologize later attitude, there's been a complete 180 at the company. Sports is a different world. We have a different audience. We can be very concerned with that 18 to 34-year-old white male Republican audience. You know, we don't want to piss off that fan. But the reality is a good story is a good story, and we all know that. So it's finding ways to make LGBTQ stories interesting to any fan. But the real turnaround, and this is the beauty of employee resource groups, is I basically started inviting myself to content meetings. So the all hands meetings for radio or TV producers, writers, whoever it was, I reached out to the top of that department and said, can I have 5 minutes at your meeting? I want to explain what employee resource groups are and what they are not. Because there was that view of like, oh, it's just a fan club. It's just a bunch of gay people getting together and talking about what's interesting. And the reality is, you know, we are a resource. And so when I would present at these meetings, I would say, you know, my role in the employee resource group is not to change your story. It's not to tell you how to write it. It's not to make you feel stupid about something. It's to make sure that that however many months of research and journalism went into your project isn't undone by that one word choice or that one phrase that you use that's either straight up offensive or just totally outdated. And that's sort of morphed over the years where people now content creators will come with interview questions. And, there are ways of asking things that, there was one example, we had a story on a gay NFL Patriots player. And one of the questions was, did you have sex with the women you dated in college? And so my feedback to that producer was, asking that is A, extremely personal. B, would you ask a straight athlete that? And it was probably a moment that was pretty embarrassing and maybe shameful for him and the women. So why do we assume that this is fair game because someone's gay? And a simple rephrase of that, were they intimate relationships? That's a lot less aggressive. That's going to get a much more honest and open answer, and you're not going to shut down your interviewee. So one thing that I've tried to do over the years is get ahead of stories. So we've done events on the Sochi Olympics and Russia's anti-gay legislation before the Olympics actually happened. How are we going to talk about that? What's the appropriate terminology? How do we talk about trans athletes, gender neutral, non-binary athletes? We try to do these events on campus ahead of the stories actually coming into the news so that people are prepared for it. But I think, one of the biggest things is a lot of our stories are subjective. There have been times where I've said, and, you absolutely bleep the F word out of that. And there have been times when I said, no, I want to hear that. And here's why. And that's the other part of it, is giving the storytellers an explanation why. If I just write back to them and say, like, you need to change this to this, change that to that, and take that out, that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't teach anybody. It doesn't educate. So saying things like, hey, instead of homosexual or homophobic, why don't you use anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ? And here's why. It's been associated with religious fundamentalism. It's taken on a very negative meaning. You might want to keep the F word in it because that's a punch in the gut that people need to hear, that this child who was hazed was called that by his coach. If you just say, the coach called him a bad word, people are like, oh, that's too bad. But if you hear that word from a crying mom, you're like, oh my God, like this is bad. So there are really subjective things that honestly, heterosexual, cisgender people shouldn't know. They don't know. It's important to meet them on their level, never make them feel stupid, and just educate them at the same time, and thank them in the first place for reaching out and for doing the story. Because at the end of the day, all I care about is how that story goes home and how that kid at home or adult at home is receiving it and seeing themselves represented on TV.
So can just a follow-up question to you, not only are you going into these boardrooms asking for time for 5 minutes to talk to people, but you're a woman in a sports world. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because we don't often get to hear, and we know how disproportional and things can be in the workplace. So how did you tackle that? Or how did you find that bravery? How did you do it?
I mean, the first thing I'll really point out about our company is, of all of the meetings that I've asked for, no one has ever said no. No one in 15 years of this. So, it really was a matter of, okay, I might get some backlash. I might have someone say, no, you can't come. My management might look at it as a distraction from my job. I don't know, but I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to make that sacrifice of my time and energy. And I don't love public speaking. I did not love getting up in front of these people. But the mistakes that we were making were so avoidable and so easy to fix that when I tried to present it in a way that took people's ego out of it. You're not supposed to know this. I don't know half of this stuff. I have to research it. It's totally fine to send me an email like that with those words in it. HR is not going to knock on your door. Here's a face to put to the name when you see an email. Because honestly, no one's going to send me an email with a bunch of like derogatory terms in it if they don't know who I am. So it really has been a matter of like just finding the confidence going in and saying like, look, you're not dumb for not knowing this stuff. Like, this is why we're here and we want you to reach out. You shouldn't be embarrassed by it. I offend myself constantly. I research stuff constantly. I ask for answers that I don't have. And to just make people really feel comfortable that they can ask you absolutely anything. And the reaction has always been great. So it's like once that first meeting goes well, it's like, all right, I'm going to invite myself to the next one and the next one. And I think executive buy-in at the top was always important, you know, to get to know those people at the top to say, you know, yes, they see the value in employee resource groups. And yes, we would like to have you at this meeting, because at the end of the day, like, not just ESPN Equal, but all of the employee resource groups or diversity and inclusion teams, like, they are going to make your content better. They are what are going to help you win awards and look good at the end of the day. So who doesn't want that?
Yeah, well, what a wonderful and strategic sort of way of doing it. And thanks for telling and sharing your story with us. Okay, so now let's pose a question to Stephen C. And I feel like every time I talk to you, I should like be posing or doing something, just because I hear pose in my mind every time I look at you, but I'll try to withhold from doing that. Stephen C., how did your Bronx upbringing, your life experiences, lead to the development of Pose, those specific characters that we see? So many of us, you know, are familiar with Paris is Burning, but you've taken it and made it, brought it to a whole new audience, and it's become really its own independent, special thing. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in New York City, where I currently am, in the 1980s. You know, I grew up in housing projects. We didn't have a lot of money. And if you know anything about New York in the 80s, you know, we were ground zero for the HIV/AIDS epidemic, as well as the crack epidemic. So it was a really difficult upbringing. It was a tough existence in New York at that time. And my life was directly impacted by both epidemics. You know, looking back at content, and frankly, I would argue that's still the case, you weren't really seeing a lot of diversity. I think that term is overused, but you know, there wasn't a breadth of content, right? So you were seeing a lot of the same stories. And you know, when it comes to Pose specifically, you know, I did a lot of reflecting while I was working on my MFA in screenwriting at UCLA about what was the content that I was consuming as a young person, and how impactful, specifically for me as a queer person, it would have been to turn on the television in the 80s and in the early 90s when I was going through my adolescence and see myself reflected back, to see my story. And so that really was the initial spark of inspiration. You know, at the time that I wrote the first draft of Pose, which was the very tail end of 2013, television was being dominated in this golden or platinum era of TV by straight, white, cisgendered male anti-heroes. You know, so we were coming off of The Sopranos, and we had Breaking Bad, and we had Mad Men. And I thought, like, where are the stories that are centering women, centering LGBTQ plus people, centering BIPOC folks? And so for me, that was really the focus when I thought about what I want my career to be, and specifically what kind of content I want to put out there. And when it comes specifically to focusing on and centering the ballroom community, a couple things. One is that I watched Paris is Burning as a college student at Binghamton University, and I was amazed that the community existed, you know, was inspired to come out because of Paris is Burning. But what really fascinated and really floored me is that my parents both grew up in Harlem, you know, as Afro-Latin people, and somehow I did not know that this community existed until watching the documentary. And I will be honest with you, now having created Pose, I get a lot of specifically LGBTQ plus people say to me, I did not know that this was a thing. I'd never heard of the ballroom community before. And I'm shocked by the number of queer and trans people who have never seen Paris is Burning, which I believe is currently on Netflix, so you should check it out. But you know, I'm always sort of amazed by that information. And I think what's so important for everyone to know, but I think especially for our cisgendered and our straight allies, is that we as queer and trans people really are the only community that have to go out and seek our history. It isn't taught in any school curriculums, right? So we have to actively go out there and educate ourselves. And that's why, chosen family becomes so important. And in many ways, our history has been completely erased. So when we think specifically about the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which we highlight on Pose, we so rarely see it from a Black lens, or so rarely see it from a Latinx lens, or from the perspective of trans people. And so it was really important for me to take this conversation, this discourse that some people have been steeped in for a number of decades, and just take the lens and shift it ever so slightly so that we were seeing it from a different perspective.
As a gay person seeing it, it's just seeing that representation, seeing things that you've read about and seen, of course, just makes you feel a certain type of happiness inside. But what has it been like for you to see all these sort of heterosexual cisgender people who are now also attracted to the show and are learning along the way? What's that like?
You know, it feels like a privilege, you know, and it's one that I certainly, I don't take lightly. You know, I've had so many, it runs the gamut from walking down the street in New York, or being at the Brooklyn Museum and having, you know, 18 and 19, like high school students stop me to say, I watched the show and I really love it, to being on a plane, flying between LA and New York, and having a grandmother say to me, I wish that Pose existed when I was raising my children, because I think it would have shifted how I parented. So, you know, when you have folks who are coming to you open-hearted to talk about what the show means to you, I mean, it raises the stakes. You know, I know that there's, especially in this current climate and with this current administration, there's an urgency to the work that I and my collaborators are doing on this show. And we certainly don't take any of that lightly, because we know how critically important it is.
Powerful, and so much purpose, and many of us are grateful to see the show and see it continue and develop. Okay, let's keep going here. Stephen H., let's talk about Pixar. You know, it's such a unique place at Disney when it comes to animation. Working with Pixar, at Pixar, with those colleagues, are there hurdles? Are there benefits when it comes to, you know, telling LGBTQ stories and sort of points of views?
You know, to go back to what I was saying before, it's Pixar is a place where they consider it a director-driven studio that's all been about telling their stories, right? Like the director gets to tell the kind of story that they want to tell and how they want to tell it. And a lot of the directors that we've had up to now have been sort of like straight white men. And so it's like, I think through the Spark Shores program and sort of like what I see happening now in the development department, there's more diversity happening in that realm, which is really nice to see. But but it still comes back to being a director-driven studio. So like, what are the stories they want to tell? And like, I got to tell this story, you know, so like, hopefully the next one, there'll be a lesbian filmmaker. Hopefully there'll be a trans filmmaker. Like, we need to see those kind of stories being put out, because it matters. Like to Stephen's point, it's hearing you say that, I was like, oh my God, those are exactly the same tweets and messages I got about Out, was how much like, I wish I had that when I was a kid. You know, guys my age in their 50s who are like, I wish I had that when I was a kid to see myself as, to like the little kids, you know, thank you, you know, like that just blows me away. The fact that we can have such an impact just telling these kinds of stories. We certainly need more and more of them, you know.
Why do you think it took us, you know, so long to just kind of push for this representation? Because the reason why we're seeing it is because we have people like all of you in those boardrooms fighting to make sure these stories are told. Why do you think why are we just now, or relatively recently, kind of getting here?
Oh God, I got to answer for all of us.
For yourself.
No, I mean, a lot of it's just creating an atmosphere where we feel safe to tell these stories, you know, like like having producers who are interested in hearing us and hearing the stories that we want to tell and the way we want to tell it. I think that's a huge thing, is having those people in those positions, so that when, you know, when I pitched out, no, I don't want to spoil it, but like, you know, there's this moment in the film, okay, I'm totally going to spoil it. But the moment in the film where the mom says like, I just hope that he makes you happy. And it was like this moment of like it's very like out, it just comes out, right? So there was a Pixar were very visual storytellers, and there was a lot of people that were like, I don't like it, it's a little on the nose. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, kind of thing. But there was one woman, Mary Coleman, in development. She like spoke up and was like, I really love this as like a white mom. She's like, I think this is like the best part of the film. And I was like, thank you. Like I was just like so like, oh, you know, somebody got it, you know. So it's having those people in those positions, like a really diverse group of people, to like help tease out the kinds of stories we want to tell, you know, and seeing the value in that, and not like saying, no, you should go this way and do this way, kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think that's important, is to support the storytellers and the way they want to tell their stories.
Yeah, you don't know if that person's not in the room, you don't know it, right? So you have to be in the room, as you said, to be able to sort of convey those stories and those issues. Okay, Stephen, thank you. Dan, back to Hulu. You know, you and your team always working so hard to put out content. How do you make sure that there isn't a LGBTQ sort of threshold? How do you tackle that? How do you work on that?
Yeah, well, you know, look, Hulu is curated. Our slate of Hulu originals is curated and really intentional. Some of the other streaming services, it sort of feels like they're doing something for everyone, whereas we, you know, are very clear on what we're going to align, not just our production budget behind, but our marketing and publicity budgets and support with the full weight of Hulu's resources. So as I said before, it's about meeting with as many queer storytellers as possible, and not just queer storytellers, but folks of color, women, queer folks of color, bringing like the sort of multiplicity of point of view that can be a part of the LGBTQ community, and that intersectionality into the storytelling process. Because as I said before, the LGBTQ audience is not a monolith. We want to see ourselves reflected in a huge array of genres and across the full spectrum of Hulu originals. You know, and so we're constantly just reaching out to folks that we are excited by their work, we want to meet with. I met Stephen Canals here for the first time like a year ago, I think, because my boss and I, you know, had the opportunity to sit down with him, and we're huge fans of Pose, and since then we have kept sort of like reaching out to each other to find a way to work together. He's extremely busy, rightfully so it hasn't worked out yet, but that's the process, right? And on Love Victor, for example, the showrunners Isaac Apteker and Elizabeth Berger, they, you know, were a part of the feature film Love, Simon. They also brought someone with that show, Brian Tannen, who is empowered to be sort of like the queer voice leading the writer's room, and bringing a huge amount of authenticity to that show and lived experience. And something that we both have in common is the desire to wish to have had that show when we were younger. And I don't think that any member of the LGBTQ community who's a part of that show takes that for granted. And so it's always about finding the people who are going to bring that authenticity, that specificity, and that appreciation to the work. Because when you have limited shots on goal and you have to be really intentional about your resources, not one can sort of go to waste.
Yeah. Michael Cimino is great. And I find myself connecting to that show in more ways than one. My family is Cuban and Puerto Rican, and sort of all their Latino traditions that you see on the show. I felt seen. I felt like, oh God, it's not just my family. It's not just this group. They do it too.
Absolutely, and I'm thrilled to hear that. And that, you know, that intersectionality of like, how are we reflecting the lived experiences of people who are a part of multiple communities? That's a constant part of our conversations around the development scripts for season 2, but also, I think rightfully so of the response to the first season. And so I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, you do so much research, sort of, for what's to come. Do you find yourself, and you said, all of us have said that, the gay community is not a monolith. Do you find yourself still learning aspects about the gay community that maybe you didn't know that much about, that you're like, oh, this would be great for a show, or this is a good angle? Is that like a constant thing?
For sure. I mean, I'm a cisgendered straight guy, right? But I'm working with a creator right now who's trans. I've worked with queer women before. I'm always learning from, the folks who are part of the community in different ways and their lived experiences, because they're different from mine. And also constantly learning how to advocate, to self-advocate, and to advocate on behalf of the content that I believe will be important and an event for the community. Because I think that if you make a show that's an event for the community, it becomes an event to the mainstream audience as well.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Dan. Sarah, I don't want you to feel left out, so we're coming to you, of course. You're next. So taking it back to ESPN and storytelling, can you describe a few examples for us where it's been having the right talent and representation behind the camera that has led to those, powerful and respectful, memorable stories that stand out? Because there is a lot of, it's very intentional, isn't it?
It is very intentional. And there are so many examples of times where we've either avoided these major pitfalls that would have been a major problem for the company, or just made a story better. And as a company, because of the belief in diversity and inclusion, we've been put in positions where we can do these kind of stories. So, I mean, as in my day job, as a feature producer, I pitch LGBTQ stories. I pitch minority community stories. I pitch the stories that I want to see as a gay sports fan, and that maybe I'm not seeing enough of, or, is on my radar, but might not be on other people's radars yet. So, as a company, we're so past, luckily, LGBTQ 101, where it's like, we know not to say the offensive words anymore. Like, that's great. So how do we take our storytelling from great to exceptional, and what are the tiny tweaks that we can make that have this enormous impact on things? So it can be as simple as changing a word. There was a story that I screened where, they referred to an athlete who finally came out at the age of 30. And then later in the story, another wrestler was so fearful that he didn't come out until he was 32. And, we want to be careful with words like finally, and he didn't come out until, and somehow implying that like there's a right time to come out, and these people were so late in coming out. So, it's a simple thing like, hey, just lose the word finally. He came out at the age of 30. You're not losing anything to the story, and you're losing that little jab that maybe that person or someone out there who's twice that person's age who hasn't come out is going to walk away feeling like, I'm a loser. Like, I haven't come out yet. And like, he finally came out at 30. Who am I at 55 now? There was another story where the writer identified a female wrestler as a lesbian. A couple pages later in the story, she has a quote, as a gay woman in the locker room, I was concerned that XYZ. And later in the piece, as a sports entertainer and gay woman. So in the dictionary, calling her a lesbian is not wrong. It's not on the offensive terms to avoid list of the year, but she doesn't identify as a lesbian. And I only catch that because that's how I identify. I identify as a gay woman. I do not like the word lesbian. I will correct you. I will ask you not to call me that. But by law, you're not wrong in the definition if you were to say that to me, but it's not how I identify. So, and I know a lot of gay women who feel that way, and it's because the word lesbian was used in such a gross and derogatory way that, to me, honestly, I've been out for almost 20 years, like, it still makes me cringe. That's that sort of internalized homophobia that we talk about, where I don't like that word. Don't use it for me. So changing that in the story is respectful to the wrestler who the story was about, but it's also showing our fans that like we pay attention to this stuff. there was an E60 on a high school trans athlete in track and field. And I remember I went to watch a screening of it while it was still in edit. And there's this point when his name was Matt Dawkins, this trans male. And he comes down the stairs in this home video a few years before, and this is pre-transition. And the mom looks at Matt in this prom dress. And Matt is so uncomfortable. And I'm just feeling that, like when my mom put me in a dress, feeling of like, oh my God, I just want to hide in this corner. And you hear the mom behind the camera say, oh my God, it's like a totally different person. And my suggestion at that meeting was, let that breathe. Let that point hit home, because it is a different person. You're putting a trans male in a woman's dress. So yeah, that is a different person you're looking at. So it can be like the tiniest things like that, you know, and then even, you know, straight allies are really important to our storytelling too. And there was a really powerful piece called Courage Game produced by Ben Weber, who has a gay sister and very much is, you know, participates as an ally in ESPN Equal, as does the head of features. And they had produced this feature in 2005, Ben didn't, sorry. In 2005, Greg Garber, the reporter, did, on the first Division I male athlete lacrosse player who had come out. So fast forward 10 years, there's an 11-year-old kid who plays lacrosse who's struggling with his sexuality, who's suicidal. His parents don't know what to do. They're literally Googling online, like, what the hell do we do with this kid? You know, he's gay, he's suicidal. And they came across the 2005 story on Andrew Goldstein, lacrosse player. And they did a follow-up piece and they connected Andrew and Braden. And this story, this one video that ESPN did in 2005, literally saved this, you know, 11-year-old, 12-year-old's life. And they're still connected. And the piece is about them coming together and Andrew sending him his helmet from college and when he played pro. You know, so the importance of our stories can save lives, but I think little tweaks and you know, the one other example I'll give was really recent, and it was something that I was producing, was the Caitlyn Jenner tribute. And, you know, we do, in, you know, breaking news for people outside of this industry, we do obituaries. I call them tributes because obituaries feels gross, but we do them ahead of time, you know, so you've got 95% of the 5-minute beautiful video storytelling done so that when that person passes away, you're not trying to pull footage and scramble and put something respectful and beautiful together. So I produced one on Caitlyn Jenner, and the script as it was starting with the 1976 Olympics where Bruce Jenner was participating. And I use Bruce Jenner because Caitlyn uses Bruce Jenner as that person. But we as a company, you know, we can't start that video or end that video with footage of that era of Caitlyn's life. Caitlyn will be the one who has passed away. So we need to start with her, we need to end with her. And then we ran into a snag where I'm looking at it like, we need to talk about these Olympic achievements and pre-transition, and Caitlyn views that person as Bruce, but not everybody knows that. So how do we avoid having people jump on us as a company saying, you don't understand that trans people, once they transition, you don't use that name, and you know, and so it was a matter of, I found a soundbite where Chris Connolly's interviewing her at one point, I think in 2015, and showing Caitlyn a photo album of pictures from the Olympics. And Chris says, you know, when you look at these photos, how do you want us to refer to that person? And Caitlyn says, that's Bruce. That's Bruce. I'm very proud of my past. So the point being, she says Bruce Jenner. We never say it. From that point on in the piece, it's Caitlyn Jenner or just Jenner. So it was finding that sort of creative way around so that people, when they're watching this beautiful tribute, aren't distracted by the fact that maybe there's an old pronoun in there because Caitlyn is the one that said it. So I don't think people outside of the community would necessarily pick up on a lot of those things, but I do want to plug that straight allies who reach out and care about doing these stories in the first place, let alone getting the language and everything right, are really huge to have in our corner.
Sure, there's so much to be said for honoring people and addressing them as they want to be addressed, and making sure we take those moments to those steps to make sure that happens, because it does make a difference, as has been clear in everything that you talked about. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so Stephen C., let's move over to you real quickly here. You know, for years, Hollywood used to hire straight actors to play LGBTQ plus roles. That's something that you've talked about in the past, and you've also talked about the importance of when it comes to gay men and women and trans characters having actual people play those roles. Talk about what that process has been like and why it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is about equity in film and television. You know, I've certainly been on the record saying this, and plenty of LGBTQ plus performers have also said this. It isn't that the community is anti-straight or cis folks playing, you know, queer and trans characters. It's just at this moment, the opportunities for queer and trans people to act aren't abundant, you know, and certainly not to play their own, you know, a version of themselves, or to express their own stories through film and television. And so I think what's really critically important is that we start to shift and get to a place where we're seeing more equity in terms of the roles that are offered, and then who's being hired for those roles. And then we can kind of circle back around and have a conversation about who can play. But I think in this moment where we aren't seeing a ton of equality, I think it's really critically important that you cast authentically. And so when it came to Pose, where we had not one, but 5 trans women of color, primarily Black and Latinx, it was really important for us to have 5 trans women who were coming in and understood what it means to be a Black trans woman, and would inhabit and embody that role and infuse it with all the authenticity that you would hope a performer would. You know, I think in the case of this narrative, you know, having grown up in New York, I know what it feels like to walk down, you know, the street in New York City, specifically in the era that we are capturing on Pose. You know, having grown up in housing projects, I know what those, you know, graffiti-addled, you know, piss-stained hallways look and smell like. You know, that there's a very specific experience that I had growing up, and that's what I'm trying to capture in my narrative. I don't want someone who's going to go off and have to research what that was like. You know, there's a feeling and a texture and an understanding of that life that if you've lived it, doesn't have to be explained. And it makes the process of telling the story that much easier. And so beyond the writing, it was really critically important to have performers who are going to come in and be able to just look at these characters on the page and say, I understand what that emotional experience is. I've been on that journey before, and can then just be in front of a camera and then just express it. And so, you know, I hope that other content creators will push not only their collaborators, but continue to push studios and networks to also cast authentically. You know, I think there's a really beautiful documentary produced by a friend of mine, Sam Fader, called Disclosure. And it's all about the history of transgender representation in film and television. And I think specifically when we're thinking about the trans community, for years, because you had admittedly an Emmy award-winning performer, but someone like Jeffrey Tambor, for example, playing a trans woman on the show Transparent on Amazon, the assumption then from some audience members would be, oh, so being trans just means that it's a man putting on a dress, you know, to the point that Sarah was making earlier. And it's like, no, that's not what this is. Like, to be trans means that, you know, the body that you were born into isn't in alignment with the gender that you were assigned at birth, you know? And so that's what we're trying to get audiences to understand that experience. But if all you're seeing on television are, you know, cisgendered folks being awarded and given accolades for playing trans people, then what ultimately are we saying about who trans people and what the trans community is and who they are? And so those are the kinds of things that, at least on Pose, that we're trying to battle against, you know, in educating our audience and getting them to have a broader understanding of the trans community.
And in some ways, it's really a kick in the gut to these bigger communities when, you know, a man is playing a trans woman, isn't it not only insulting but hurtful in many ways to some people?
Well, yes, and I mean, I shouldn't be speaking for the trans community. As a trans ally, I find it incredibly offensive. And I also think it's wildly problematic because I think you look at all of here's the thing, when we were casting for Pose, you often will hear there isn't an abundance of LGBTQ performers out in the world, which isn't true. The original draft of Pose, originally we had 3 trans women. And after meeting with all of the incredible trans performers who happen to also be Black and brown, we then increased the number. And so we added 2 additional characters. And so 3 became 5. The reality is there are so many incredible trans performers out in the world beyond those who you already know. Whether it's the women of Pose, whether it's incredible women like Laverne Cox or Trace Lysette, like there are so many trans performers out in the world who are doing incredible work. And so, I want to see those individuals get the same opportunities and the same incredible roles as their, in some cases straight and cisgender counterparts. And that's ultimately what they are asking for as a community. And so that is what I, as an ally, am pushing for, not only through my work on Pose, but certainly, what I'm advocating for behind the scenes when talking to studios and networks about other content that they're creating.
Yeah, and as you said, it's not just trans people playing these characters, but they happen to be phenomenal at the craft of acting. And so that's why those stories come across the way they do. Guys, we have had so many questions come in through the chat room. And so we obviously cannot get to them all with the amount of time that we have, but we did pull a couple of them. And so we're going to do like a quick round robin of some of these questions. And we can chime in as we see fit here. So the first one here, how do you address concerns about backlash to gay content and boycott threats from the conservative customer base, conservative viewers? How do you address that? Who wants to tackle it first?
I can jump in. I mean, I have a super quick answer for ESPN, and this is my opinion only. If people don't like that we're showing an LGBTQ story and they take it to the degree of hatred, and I'm going to unlike Monday Night Football on Facebook, and I'm not going to do this, the reality is next Monday they're going to like it again. They're not giving up Monday Night Football. They're not giving up their love of sports because we showed a 4-minute profile piece on an LGBTQ athlete. I just don't believe that fans are that, that would be willing to give that up because of this. I just don't buy into the narrative.
You think it's kind of a threat, an empty threat in some ways?
Even if they come through, they're going to come through for 5 minutes, and then they're going to be like, I want to see the Red Sox. I want to watch the Yankees. People are not going to not watch ESPN because once in a while we show an LGBTQ story. I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah. Stephen C., do you want to jump in on this one? How do you deal with, the backlash or boycott threats? How do you deal with that?
I'll be perfectly honest. We really haven't had to deal with that when it comes to Pose. At least, I would say all of the energy that I've received has all been really positive. I think a large part of that has to do with, as a show, we're leaning into universal truths. So on the surface, our show may be a period piece that highlights the ballroom community in New York City, but at our core, really, it's a family drama where we are highlighting chosen family, resilience, love. And I think that those are universal themes that anyone coming in, regardless of what your identities and your background is, can connect to and understand. So I've literally in the 3 years I've worked on this show, I've never had a single human being come up to me and say, I don't like what the show is about, or I don't enjoy the fact that you are centering trans people. Never.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. I don't think a lot of people knew that. Stephen H., you want to jump in on this? How do you deal with boycott threads? How do you deal with backlash as you're sitting down to write or direct or figure? Does any of that play a role?
I mean, not in the telling of the story, because I think you're getting into a place where you're trying to be as genuine and honest about what the characters are going through. Similar to Stephen's point, like I'm just trying to be genuine. I'm just trying to be honest to that human experience. And if people don't get that, they don't get it. But I mean, you kind of know, like, well, I'm definitely gonna get some backlash, and it comes, and you just kind of, in my brain, I just sort of went, I'm not gonna add fuel to the fire. I'm just gonna, they can hate if they hate and whatever, and I'm just not gonna do it. And I literally, I saw some comment on Twitter, and the guy was like, you know, I don't want to be homophobic, but it wasn't really my kind of movie. And I was like, and I started writing a reply, and I was like, I'm sorry I didn't appeal to you. Here's some other non-homophobic films that you might like. And I made a list of films, and then I was like, I laughed, and then I deleted it because I'm like, I'm not engaging. I refuse. Like, even with comedy, I was like, no, it's just giving fuel to that fire, and I don't want to deal with it. You know, I just want to keep telling
Alex,
stories.
Yeah. Can I say to Stephen H's point, I think that what's so important to note is that, especially right now where we're in this place where there's an abundance of content and places to find that content, that, you know, the work that, you know, the beautiful short that Stephen created, or the work that Dan is doing, you know, Love Victor, which I also loved, even though I don't think I'm the target audience for it. And certainly the work that Sarah's doing, like, you know, we are creating this unspoken contract with the audience, you know, and TV is this really beautiful, really personal medium, you know, like, you are being invited into people's homes. And so I think what's so critically important with the work that all of us are creating is that we're being upfront and center about, and very transparent about what it is that we've created, right? So it wasn't like Stephen or Disney Plus was hiding what Out is about, right? Like, it's literally in the title. And so you have the decision as an audience member to decide, are you going to invite us into your home? And I think it's just that simple. So this is maybe very defiant or a little militant, but my attitude is, if you don't like the content, then turn the television off. You don't have to watch it. But that doesn't mean that we now as content creators should stop creating it.
Yeah, I know. You're welcome to come into, but you don't have to watch if you don't want to, is what you're saying. Guys, let's move on to I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions here. Perhaps Dan, you'll start with this one here. When will we start to see, the person is asking, when will we start to see LGBTQ plus lead characters in feature-length films? We've made great strides, but it feels like that's still a huge hurdle.
That's a great question. One that I ask myself sometimes. And you know, first of all, to be clear, I don't work directly on that many feature films. I did work on an anthology series called Into the Dark with Blumhouse that basically made about a movie a month. And one of those films was called Midnight Kiss, which came out at the end of December. And it had a queer writer, a queer director, and a cast full of LGBTQ characters, all played by LGBTQ actors. That having that authenticity was really vital and important to us. It doesn't happen as much as it should. It needs to happen more. It's a constant effort to be pushing your collaborators, for those producers and those queer storytellers to be pushing us, the network, and pushing the studio. There's a lot of voices who are part of the process to expand the pool of talent that they're drawing on. But it's an absolute priority, and I think it will, you know, we're never going to be at the moment when we've arrived. We can always do better. And I think that the first step towards getting there is acknowledging it. The work that Stephen has done on Pose is incredibly instrumental and a beautiful example, and one that I think that we should all be striving towards.
Yeah. Okay. Our last question, and it's kind of like a recap here, so we'll go through everyone sort of very quickly. But what moment, what work, what specific thing are you most proud of right now in your career, in your life, and what you're doing? Stephen H. It's like, oh, me.
I have to go first. I don't know. I came into this late, this is like the first time I put my toe in the water, in telling this story. And I'm just taking it in right now. I'm like, I don't know if, I'm just, yeah, just trying to keep learning from the experience at this point,
Yeah.
Learning.
So enjoying the process is what I'm hearing along the way, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've learned so much working with so many great storytellers at Pixar, and then the follow up of this, like having these discussions and realizing I am a part of this community. Like feeling like I do belong. I'm not an imposter in this community. I actually belong somewhere. That's what makes this so emotional for me.
Yeah. Sarah, want to chime in?
That's a hard thing to whittle down. I think top of the list always for me will be a few years ago, a coworker in their late 40s coming out to me who had literally never been out to a friend or family member. We've done events understanding the T, understanding the G. This year I want to do understanding the B. There's I think not enough conversation around bisexual invisibility and their history. With the current social justice movement going on, we're trying to find every intersection possible between the Black community and LGBTQ community. So this month for October History Month, putting together a list that celebrates Black, queer, LGBTQ, pioneers in our history. There are so many great stories out there that people just don't know about. And so being able to bring a light to those stories, and especially with intersectionality, has been huge. But I think the biggest accomplishment for me personally is the amount of times I've been able to turn people from critical to curious, and to not hear something new or see something new and find ways for them not to shut down or be fearful or awkward or anything like that. Like, have fun with it. Just create a curiosity in people, because our stories really are interesting. And sometimes it's just a matter of making people feel comfortable enough in the room to hear them.
Yeah, that's so important. Stephen C., closing words. Just is there a project? Is there a thing, that one thing you're so proud of?
Yeah, I think similar to Sarah, it's hard to sort of synthesize it all down into one thing. What popped in my head as you asked the question is, I spent nearly 10 years working in higher education as a college administrator. And when I made the decision to leave that career to pursue storytelling in Hollywood, I told myself that I want to continue to use my life, my voice, my privilege, my platform to educate others, because I really do believe in the power of the medium, and that content should be about more than just entertainment, but it should also be about educating. And I always want my work rather, to live in that intersection of those two really important things. And so I wasn't sure if that was a goal that I would accomplish early in my career, because there was so much hesitation when it came to pitching Pose. And to be in a place this early in my career where the show now exists and where I am being encouraged to create content that continues to not only entertain but educate, I think is probably the thing that I'm the most proud of, that I set a goal for myself and that I've accomplished it so early, and that hopefully I'll continue to use not only my career, but the door that was opened for me to create a show like Pose, that I will hold that door open to allow for more content creators, specifically content creators from historically marginalized communities, so women and LGBTQ plus people and Black and Indigenous people of color, to also tell their stories.
Such inspiration. Stephen, Dan, want to wrap it up for us?
Everyone has said, I agree with everything that everyone has said around this. I feel the same way. It's not about one specific thing. It's about the totality of the work, and being, I'm proud of being a part of a team that has empowered me to be an advocate, to hold my bosses and colleagues accountable, who hold me accountable sometimes. All the way to the top, our head of scripted content, Craig Gerwick, is the executive champion at Hulu for our employee resource group, Hulu Pride. So that allyship runs all the way to the top, and being a part of that team is something that gives me a lot of pride every day.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, guys. I've been reading just a few of the comments, and I want you to know that everyone who was watching is so happy that they got to hear you guys speak, and so thankful for the stories that you shared. Your attention to detail, gang, it's noticed, it's seen, it's appreciated. So just remember that as you move forward. It's been such a great pleasure to be able to have a conversation with you guys this morning, and everyone who's watching us from all over the world, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Alex.
Thank you.
You're muted, Wokey.
I'm sorry, I got chills the entire time I was listening. So folks are transitioning out. Incredible job, team. Incredible job, incredible job, incredible job. We'll send a follow-up note, virtual hugs. I tissue here. It was that incredible. Thank you for your patience with us. We are HR practitioners who wore the hats of producers today and over the last couple of weeks. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. We've captured all of the comments in the comment section and going to share, because obviously you weren't able to read all of them, but people just had so many incredible stories and affirmations for what you said today. And so know that you made Kalu and myself, we're texting back and forth, really proud to be a part of the Disney family. And so hats off, incredibly proud of this team. Thank you for coming together and waking up so early for those of you that are on the West Coast, but great job today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Gracias, gracias, gracias. You're amazing, guys. Beautiful.
Stephen, every time you said abundance, like there's not an abundance of LGBTQ characters, I'm like, House of Abundance. I'm like, don't get distracted.
I did the same thing.
It's so great to meet all you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great
Thank
job,
you.
Alex.
Incredible
Thanks
job,
for
Alex.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
guys are
Thank you.
super inspiring, guys.
Very inspiring.
This is
We got to
great.
take this on the road. We're going to kick us out in 2 minutes, but I'll follow up via email. The feedback has been incredible. So thank you, team. You did our family proud today, and have a great rest of the week. Yes, have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Stay
guys.
safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet
Bye,
you
Sarah.
all.
Bye, Stephen.
Good to
Bye,
meet you.
Dan.
Bye, Stephen. Bye, Sarah. Bye,
Bye,
Dan.
Alex.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.